Hello and welcome to Praetorian Legion's basic training video number 1. We're going to assume you have a rough understanding of the way that the HUD system works. We're going to get into the basics of purchasing a mech and different things you can do with the mech before you actually buy the mech. If you mouse over the mech chassis, it'll pull up an information window to your right that covers a lot of the basic information about the mech. It explains to you hard points, upgrades the mech currently has, tells you the engine size and what the max engine is, so you can get a rough feel for how fast it'll actually go if you max out the engine. And then it gets down into loadouts, the weapons it comes with, little details, and then it gives you the quirk summary that you can use to estimate how much better those weapon systems will be, or worse, depending on the quirks that you have. Also, there it gets into a bunch of different things such as movement speed, jump distance, jump height, velocity, armor enhancements, structure enhancement. So just really look closely at the mech chassis before you buy them and do the comparison yourself. Going further, down here in the lower right hand side, it tells you the tonnage of the mech chassis, the slots that are used and the total available, the armor that it currently equipped and what the maximum is, and then it gives you the heat management, whether or not it has standard heat sinks, double heat sinks, how many heat sinks it has in addition to the ones that come in the engine and what the engine heat sinks are. Firepower comparison, equivalency, your speed, engine, that kind of stuff. One of the cool little features of the Mech Lab is that you can actually click on the View and Mech Lag tab and you can modify the mech chassis without actually buying it, so you can see if it'll be a good fit for you. Well, right off the bat, I was looking at this mech and I was thinking to myself, that heat is really bad right there at that 1.03. Well, there's a couple quick things we can do to increase the heat efficiency. One of them, we can add endostill, which gives us 4.5 tons to play with, but it fills up some of our structure slots. And if we grab our heat sinks, we can start cramming heat sinks in there and we can see what that does for us. Oh, I'm out of tonnage slots for it, but my heat efficiency is now up to 1.15. Well, let's see what I can get if I add ferrofibrous. Well, I gave up another 14 slots, but I gained another 1.6 tons, which lets me do 2 more heat sinks, which puts my heat efficiency to 1.21. But that's a lot of slots and tonnage, and I didn't really gain a whole lot from it. Well, if I click double, it gets rid of all those other heat sinks, and I click standard and standard, so I get rid of the ferro and the endo. Look, my heat efficiency is already better than what it was to begin with at 1.08. And now I can start cramming those double heat sinks in and see what they do. See that? My heat efficiency is now at 1.28 just by doing double heat sinks and replacing the tonnage that was already there with double heat sinks. Going forward, I have the slots available. I can add endostill or ferrofibrous for tonnage. This is a critical moment of decision because a lot of people don't realize that there's a difference. I mean, that ferrofibrous gives us 1.6 tons. That's not nearly as good as what you get by running that endostill. I mean, 4.5 tons for 14.5 slots versus 1.6 tons for 14 slots. I'll take 14 slots for 4.5 tons. I think that's a better deal as far as what you're getting for it. So we'll roll it forward. We'll slap those extra heat sinks in, and we'll see what we're looking at here. Check it out. We're at 1.4 heat efficiency by making a couple little changes to the chassis. Going forward, let's talk about the weapon systems. There's another way that we could have enhanced the heat management on this with a couple little changes. Those PPCs weigh 3 tons and take up 3 slots. Well, let's take those PPCs, which have a minimum firing range of 90 meters and a maximum firing range of 1,080, and let's replace them with ER PPCs, which weigh the same amount but don't have that minimum firing range, and their maximum firing range goes up to 1,620. And let's see what it did to my heat management. Whoa, 1.24. It took a nice little chunk out of that. Well, that's because the extra range in that elimination of the minimum range comes at a heat cost. It takes 5 more heat per shot. Well, That didn't work to increase our heat management. Let's try the large pulse lasers and see what that does for us. Running the large pulse lasers increased our heat management by 1.47. The trade-off here, though, is that our max range is reduced by almost 300 compared to the standard PPCs, but the damage went up by 1. The heat went down by 3. So the game is all about trade-offs and variables. You have to look at everything. The other trade-off is the PPCs. They fire in a burst that moves slowly across the map, whereas with your pulse lasers, they fire and then they have what's called a duration, where you have to track the target for that time and keep your laser beam on them for it to do damage, and then it takes off the damage as it goes. That's the long and the short of it with this chassis. Real touch quick on the basic weapon systems. I would encourage you to go through the weapon systems, experiment with them, get a feel for them, and basically just become familiar with them because it makes a big difference. Now, going forward, let's take a look at something else over here. Let's talk about why we might choose different quirks or different weapon systems for different mech chassis. It goes back to the quirks. On this particular mech, I put ERPPCs on there because it gets a PPC cooldown, ERPPC cooldown of 10% and an ERPPC heat generation of 5%. Now, if you mouse over here, you'll see that the PPCs don't benefit from the ERPPC buffs. So it's something to keep in, keep on your mind when you're looking at weapons or loadouts for it. So, alright, going forward further, let's talk about modules real quick while we're here. They have a couple different flavors of modules. They have weapon modules, and then they have mech modules, and then they have consumables, which we count as modules because it's under that tab. The weapon modules are nice because they can increase the range or reduce the cooldown of the chassis. So that means you have an option that your weapons can fire faster, or they can shoot further, or you can put both on. That's why you try to run weapon systems that have a synergy so that you can maximize your weapon potential when you put those modules on. Whereas if you go back to the mech modules, it has a bunch of different things that do a lot of cool stuff. 360 target rotation allows you to keep tabs on the target that is within 200 meters range and keep, know where they're at so you don't lose sight of those lights. Your advanced zoom actually creates a picture-in-picture window with 4 times magnification. Really good for long-range scouting or sniping. There is this right here, which is airstrike accuracy, which you can equip to make your consumables more accurate. And artillery accuracy. And then you have capture accelerator, increases the rate of capture by 15%. Your hill climb module, which allows you to move up slopes faster by 10%. I want to say it's one of the least used modules in the game, but that's personal preference. Improved gyros will help you by reducing the amount of shake you're getting when you're getting hit by a lot of firepower. You can compensate for that with just skill and, adjusting to it and getting used to it. Radar deprivation, very useful against LRM boats and other mechs, because as soon as you break contact with them, your blip is lost off the radar. They can no longer see you. Seismic sensor allows you to detect mechs that are nearby when you are stopped and stationary. It'll throw up a red blip on your map so you can see who's moving around you. If the enemies are stationary, it won't show up. Sensor range, of course, increases your sensor range by 15%. Shock absorbance allows you to take reduced fall damage when you fall off buildings and stuff. Speed retention allows you to move faster when you have a leg that's lost. Your max cap on that is 50 kph. Target decay actually counteracts radar deprivation to an extent, but it can increase the amount of time a battle mech is trackable when it leaves line of sight. So if you have a mech that keeps playing peekaboo with you, you notice you have a real problem with that, running this on your chassis will help compensate for that. It's a real surprise for them if they're playing a bad game of Pop-Tart or peekaboo and they come out and you've been able to track them because they didn't wait long enough for their thing to decay and disappear. So you know where they're at, you know what they're doing, you can anticipate where they're going to be at. So a lot of fun. Target info gathering accelerates detailed information about the mech chassis. Always useful to know where to shoot the enemy mech at, where they're already damaged at, and if you find out faster, it's a benefit. But each of the modules has their pluses and downsides. You have to play with them, experiment, and find out what you like to play with. Get a feel for it. Consumables. They come in the advanced variants, which you can purchase for MC, or they come in the C-bill variant, which to begin with are a weaker variant, but you can do skill tree stuff that will enhance them. We'll cover that in a moment. The consumables are very useful. Artillery strike, you can use it to weaken a cluster of enemies, or if you're desperate to get a guy dead and he's being around a corner and you don't want to walk into his firing line because you're almost dead, drop an artillery strike on him. It does an area of effect damage, and odds are very high that it will kill him for you. The next one is the airstrike. The airstrike is a unique beast, is that it doesn't do an area effect like a circular effect like the artillery strike, but what it does lines. So if I'm facing an enemy and they're on the other side of a wall and there's 2 or 3 of them lined up there and I know that they're in a firing line, I can drop my airstrike right there on this side of the wall towards me, and it'll go in a straight line straight of where I'm pointing it at. So it'll hit the bottom of the wall, 1 or 2 shots will go into the wall, and then the rest will land on the enemy going outward in a line. So it's very situational. One is not better than the other in all situations because they each have their place and role. So that's why it's good to be a part of a team, so you can coordinate with part of your guys bringing one, part of your guys bringing the other. Improved UAV. UAVs are phenomenal information gatherers. You throw them up in the sky, they detect a range around, wherever they go up at, line of sight effect, and they will relay that information back to your team. They counteract ECM of all the mechs caught in them. So if you have 6 ECM mechs down there, it'll pick up all 6 of them. It'll feed back the information. It'll let your missile boats get missile locks on them. Just really useful for information gathering purposes. That and one of the artillery or airstrike are the primary ones I use. But they do have the cool shots. The cool shots provide a slight burst of cooling efficiency for your mech chassis. But I like to run cooler builds so that I don't have to worry about cool shots and I can bring something else. But it's to each his own in priorities. Get a feel for it. Find out what you like to run with. And, well, Bob's your uncle. All right, going forward. Skills. When you come into the skills, each of your mech chassis has skills that you can research out and do. You have to go through all 3 of these variants in order to unlock the next phase of it so that you can progress your mech. So you have to buy 3 mechs in order to research and master your mech chassis. Mech Mastery has a benefited slot where it opens up a module slot, something that's worth doing. So just bear that in mind when you're buying chassis or when you're looking at doing stuff. If you don't have it mastered and you sell the mech chassis, you can't spend that experience to progress it. So see how these ones are locked on there? Well, that's because I hurried and I got them to that mastery status and then I sold them without taking the rest of the way. Whereas the chassis I had, I can still unlock and I can still play it. So that's something to bear in mind and to think about. Pilot trees are useful because here is where you enhance your modules. If you look, my basic small laser range module is enhanced by 2%. If I unlock it, it's still 2%, but I can upgrade that and spend the GXP to increase it to 4%, 6%, 8%, 10%. There you go. It's maxed at 10%. Each of the different things has that ability to be upgraded and unlocked. And you have to do that and unlock it before you can actually equip it, even though you spend the C-bills. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather spend, if I'm going to buy a module, I'd rather have, that module being able to do 10% range increase versus 2% increase. One of the nice things, though, is that you unlock it, and then you buy the module at 2%. If you come back with your skill points later on and enhance the range, it will enhance the module you've already purchased, so that module's not garbage for you. It becomes enhanced as you go down. They have range, cooldown, then they have miscellaneous modules, which is the AMS stuff and the enhanced NARC stuff. Projectile speed by 20% and duration by 30%. So get a feel for those. But right here's the consumable module stuff that you can enhance. Improved UAV, airstrike, UAV upgrade. Alright, well, going forward, here's where you can enhance your different other skill sets. Spend some time in the skill trees, find out how you like to play. Just, go and spend some time with it. It'll help you out as a MechWarrior pilot, and you'll become better over time. Another little side thing for you to think about is the Mech Lab is different for clan mechs than it is for Inner Sphere mechs. And the reason why I say that, let's actually select one of our, well, let's grab the Trial clan mech, the Timberwolf C, and let's take a look at it in the Mech Lab. So fortunately, because it's a trial mech, we can actually go into the Mech Lab.
Call from a menace.
And we can look at what it does. If you look at this gets a negative quirk on it of energy cooldown and laser duration, which kind of hurts the mech chassis as far as playability. Because it means that that weapon cools down longer, and then the laser lasts longer, so it means you have to track the target longer to do full damage. Well, there's a way to get rid of that negative quirk. If you go around to the different omnipod portions of the mech chassis, you can find which omnipod is giving you that negative quirk. You can get rid of it, and then you can replace it with one that doesn't have the negative quirk, or you can find one that has a positive quirk. So right there, that left arm doesn't have a negative quirk. So my lasers no longer have that negative quirk. But there's a trade-off and a balance to it. So you got to get that feel for it. Another thing to think about is they have something called ghost heat in the game. So let's go, well, here's a classic example. Let's take a look at the Executioner. Its heat efficiency is horrible, but it's even worse because if you mouse up here, it's telling you that when you fire more than 6 small lasers or medium lasers simultaneously, you will get a ghost spike of heat. What that means is it means that it increases the total amount of heat. So where usually, if I fire a small pulse laser, it produces 6 heat, it'll fire increased heat because there's more than them firing. There's charts and stuff. You can go look that up and find the details on that. The other thing with mech building is you don't have to fill every slot with weapons. This is insane because your heat efficiency is at 0.93. You can fire one alpha strike and then your mech's going to overheat and you're going to be out of the fight. And you're going to have to wait for the cooldown. You're going to be vulnerable to fire, not be able to move around, not be able to torso twist or shield or anything else. So when you're building your mechs, don't fill out every slot. Thank you for your time. We'll pick on you later. Enjoy the... Alright, looks like I have a few more minutes without interruptions, so let's actually demonstrate to you in the field why it's not a good idea to overfill every single spot. We're actually going to take you to the polar highlands, which is negative 55 degrees Celsius. It's a very cool map. And what we're going to discuss, or what we're going to demonstrate to you is what happens when I fire an alpha strike out of this chassis. As soon as PGI decides to load for me. By the way, PGI can be used as a verb. You've been PGI'd. So, alright. Go ahead and watch.
Heat level critical.
I overheat with one alpha strike because of the amount of weapons they've loaded on here and because the heat efficiency is so low, combined with the ghost heat factor. Now, if I fire just
heat level critical.
6 weapons, do you see that? That's firing 1 large pulse laser, 3 medium pulse lasers, and a small laser. Creates that much heat. Now, if I fire, well here, if I fire just the medium lasers and pulse lasers,
heat level critical.
It's enough to almost overheat me because of the amount of ghost heat that's accumulating. Whereas if I keep it reasonable to 6, see the difference? So we've demonstrated ghost heat in effect with this video. We have demonstrated why you don't want to fill every single slot with a weapon if you don't have to. You want to balance the build. You have to think about it. It's about trade-offs. Do I really want to cram another weapon in there, or do I want to be more energy efficient? So it's, it's got its upsides, it's got its downsides. I mean, if we get rid of those two small pulses in the mix and then fire, it's only 36% heat effect, or, cooling effect. All right. Let's go ahead and let's exit out of this match again. I would like to discuss something else with you. It's something I should have mentioned on the Timberwolf, and I apologize for not doing so. We'll get back to it. All right. On the Timberwolf, if you noticed, they're running large pulse lasers with ER medium lasers. I would like to explain to you why this combination is actually a good combination. If you look at the large pulse laser, it has a cooldown rate of 3.25 with a duration of 1.12. The nice thing is that the duration of the ER medium lasers is 1.14. That means that you can fire and the weapons will track, like you have to track the target in the same spot, but the duration's about the same, so you don't have to sit there with one weapon system going over for a long period of time before full damage is dealt and out of the way. The other nice thing is their cooldown times are very close. The ER medium lasers is a 3-second cooldown, whereas the large pulse is 3.25. Well, what this does for you is there's a 0.23 second difference between the two weapon systems when you fire. Of course, that gets modified by the energy cooldown and laser duration. The reason why it's 0.23 is because the weapon's cooldown doesn't start until the duration is finished. So with your ballistics weapons on the clan side, it's not until the last shell's left the chamber, and it's not until the lasers have finished their duration. Also, the LRMs don't begin their cooldown until the last missile's left the chamber in the stream effect. So the thing here is you want to get weapon systems that the timings and durations are very similar, because it allows you to do more advanced tactics more effectively, such as torso twisting. When you peek around a corner, you don't have to sit out there in the open for as long to do your full damage. It's the same speed, the same duration. You don't feel like you're wasting stuff. So it's something to consider. The other thing to take into account is similar ranges. The nice thing here is that the large pulse laser has a max range of 1200, but its optimum range is 600, whereas the medium laser has a max range of 688, whereas optimal range is 405. That means ideally your combat point that you want to be using both weapon systems is right between 400, well, anything under 500 would be ideal. But bear in mind, below that point, the small laser weapons are going to have the advantage in ROF duration and a couple other little variables in there. We'll cover that in the next video series, which will get into more advanced building processes. Thank you very much and have a great day.